Okay, let's start the class now. While we await the screen, the presentation. Okay, good. We have it here now. Oh, sorry. While we await other learners, let's just warm up with some questions. If you can see my screen, kindly give me a thumbs up. Let me know you can see my screen. If you can't see my screen, oh, then probably you would have to rejoin the call. Okay. Okay, good. Now, in the last class, we discussed pronouns. We started with pronouns in the last class, and we discussed personal pronouns, the arrangement of personal pronouns. We also talked about reciprocal pronoun, or we talked about, which other pronoun did we discuss in the last class? Apart from reciprocal pronoun and personal pronoun, which other ones? Was it just two?
Pronoun.
Possessive pronouns. Good. Thank you for reminding me. So in today's class, we'll be looking at relative pronouns and some other pronouns that we need for this class. But then, before we proceed, I would love us to try our hands on these questions. Just these two questions. This is on arrangement of personal pronouns, and I think I gave one special rule in the last class for us to know. Okay, I have one on personal pronoun and I have one on reflexive pronoun. You have the answer mixed, though the question is on arrangement of personal pronoun too. But you have some reflexive pronouns there as the option. So let's see how far you can go with these two questions. The first question reads, the teacher invited Akpan and Dash to his office. I have A, myself, B, me, C, I, and D, himself. And the second question reads, Dash are good friends. He and I and him, I and he, then he and me. Okay, so quickly, within just 5 minutes or 3 minutes, let's type our answers to this question. Question 1 and question 2. B and A. Okay, Elena already typed B and A. B for question 1 and A for question 2. Okay, let's be for other learners too. C and A. Someone typed C and A. Wow. Okay, I have B and A, C and A, B and A, C and A. Now let's take a look at the first question. The first question reads, the teacher invited Akpan and Dash to his office. Now, in the last class, I gave us a rule for this. I said, when you want to answer a question on arrangement of personal pronoun, you take these two personal pronouns, we and us. Remember, we are dealing with plurals now, not just a single person. We are dealing with two. So we are using the plural pronoun we and us. Then we is used in the subjective form. That is when whatever you want to put is acting as the subject. And us is used in the objective form. When you talk about the object, receiver of action, and subject is the performer of action. Now for we, the two pronouns that can fall under we is, the two pronouns are you and I, you and I for this subjective. And us, you have the two pronouns you and me. Now, if you look at this first question, the teacher invited Akpan and Dash to his office. If you were to replace this, assume you don't have Akpan here. We just have the teacher invited Dash and Dash to his office. So it is going to be the teacher invited Akpan and me. The teacher invited Akpan and me. So it is going to be the teacher invited us. The teacher invited us to his office, not the teacher invited we. The teacher is the performer of the action here, which is the subject. That means that the invitation, this action word, the verb to invite, it says upon Akpan and someone. So that means that it is talking about them in the objective form, not the subject now. And for the objective form, you use us. And for us, you have you and me, you and me, you and me. So the teacher invited Akpan and me. That is why option B is correct in this sentence. Now, if you look at option A, it says myself. Myself, we are going to look at reflexive pronouns today. Myself is one of the reflexive pronouns, and reflexive pronouns are used to refer back to the subject. That is, when you talk about reflexive pronoun, the subject, which is the doer of the action, and the receiver of the action, which is the object, must be the same. Akpan and me are two different entities. Akpan and the other person, they are not the same. So we cannot use myself in this case. But let's assume that I want to write it as the teacher invited, or let's say we have Ade bought the goods himself. Now, Ade is still the person we are using the reflexive pronoun himself for. So that is the case where you can use reflexive pronoun. You can only use reflexive pronoun when the subject equals to the object. I have I. We can use I if we are talking about this gap in the subjective case, but now it is in the objective case. So I is wrong. Himself is also wrong here. So we have the teacher invited Akpan and me to his office. Now let's look at the second one. I have majority of my learners picked option A. Okay, let's see. We have Dash are good friends. Let's substitute we and us to see the one that would fit in the gap. Dash are good friends. We have we are good friends or us are good friends. Definitely, we are good friends is correct. We is correct. In this case now, in our option, I have he and I. In the option now, I have he and I have I and him, I have I and he, and I have he and me. For the subjective form, we have we, and it should be you and I. In this case now, I do not have you in my option, so I'll be going to with he, because he is also a pronoun in the subject case. That is the performer of what action, or the person or thing being talked about in a sentence. So he is subject, him is objective. Here also, we have me to be objective. We can't even have he and me are good friends. This is wrong. I and he are good friends. This is also wrong. So we are starting with what? With he, not I and he. He and I are good friends, which falls under using we. So we have option A to be the right option for this question. Option B is wrong, C is wrong, D is wrong. Okay, close to you all. Now let's move to the business of the day. Now for today, I already mentioned that we'll be looking at pronouns. We'll be looking at some other aspect of pronoun. I'll be starting with the reflexive pronouns. Now, when we say reflexive from the word reflect. When something reflects, who can unmute and tell me about reflection? What do you understand by reflection? I know I have some physics students here. So when you say reflection, what do you understand by that? Make your teacher proud now. Make your physics teacher proud. So what do you understand by the word reflection?
It is the transfer of light, like it is the transparent of light or transfer of light from one place to another, like reflecting to another place.
Okay,
Like you are
thank you very
seeing the
much.
light from
Okay,
another place.
continue.
Like you are viewing the light from another place. Like it's reflecting to another wall or another surface.
Okay, thank you for that. So you give us your own definition in the word of physics. Let's bring this back to the word of English grammar now. When we say reflection or reflexive, so here we are talking about was a sentence structure. Just like Yusra, I think it was Yusra that typed that when something bounces back. So when we talk about the subject acting upon itself, the subject, just like the word Yusra used, is bouncing back upon itself. So when the subject is bouncing back upon itself, then we talk about reflexive pronoun. Oh, let me share the screen. So when we say reflexive pronouns, before the screen comes up, they are pronouns that are used to refer back to the subject of the sentence. When we say reflexive pronouns, they are pronouns that are used to refer back to the subject of the sentence. It simply shows that the subject is acting on itself. The subject of that sentence is acting upon itself, just like Elena typed that. It means when something bounces back upon itself. So in reflexive pronouns too, it shows that the subject is acting on itself. That is, the subject is receiving the action and also performing the action. Now, for reflexive pronouns, when you see words that end in self or selves, those are examples of what? Reflexive pronouns. I have words like myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, themselves, and yourselves. So let's see. From these reflexive pronouns, you have some in the singular form, and you also have some in the plural form. From the ones you have in the singular form is myself. Myself is singular. I introduced myself to the manager. I introduced myself to the manager. This now, I. The reflexive pronoun you use for I is myself. You won't say because I am a female now. I would not say I introduce herself or she self. No. When I am self, I is the subject here, and it is also acting upon what? Upon itself. I introduce myself to the that in yourself. For example, now you wanted to surprise someone who does not even know that you know about something. The person came to your place and was like, oh, who did this? And in your own proud moments, you came out of your room and you said, oh, I did it myself. You know, if you should tell the person, I did it, the person might not want to take you serious, like you did it, you that I know. You cannot even do it. I know who did it for you, Jerry. But if you come out of the room and you tell the person, I did it myself, that is laying emphasis on the fact that you actually did it. Not someone else did not do it for you. You did it yourself. So we have I introduce myself to the manager. You need to trust yourself more. Now, for your singular, you also have you. In the singular form of reflexive pronouns, you have myself, you have yourself, you have himself, you have herself, you have itself. And for the plural, you have yourselves, themselves, and ourselves. For the singular, you have myself, you have yourself, you have himself, you have herself, you have itself. And for the plural, you have ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. Now let's continue with the examples. You need to trust yourself more. You need to trust yourself more. Now, I would not write, you need to trust myself more. No, because you does not go with the reflexive pronoun myself. Rather, it is I that you should use with myself. She taught herself in just 6 months. She taught herself in just 6 months. So you can see the agreement here. She, the reflexive pronoun for that is herself. The machine shut down itself after, oh, this is overheating. Sorry, that was there's an error here. It should be overheating, not overnight. Overheating. You know, sometimes when you're using your blender or you turn on your generators or you're even using your laptop and you've been using it, maybe the cooling fan that is installed there is not working anymore. What you will just see, and you left it overnight for it to update some softwares and all of that. You just woke up the next day and you saw that the machine already shut down. Maybe because it was generating more heat than usual, so it had to shut down itself. So when we say itself, you do not use itself for human. You use itself for things. So the machine shut down itself. You use itself for non-human. For example, animals and things. The cat cleaned up itself after eating. The cat cleaned up itself after eating. One needs to look after oneself. Good, I did not mention this. In our previous assessment, I added something like this question. One, if one, I can't really remember the question, but I think one needs to do something if dash needs to succeed. So that was the way the question was typed. So majority of my learners chose a wrong answer. And that is understandable because I know that no one is an island of knowledge. So you might not know that this, when you use one as a reflexive pronoun, it should take oneself. One needs to look after oneself. If you do not know before, now you know. When you use one, you have to continue using one. And the reflexive pronoun for one is oneself. Now I have a question here. Don't worry, I'll bring the question after the class. I do not want to tell you the answer to the question now. Dele bought the gift himself. Now, Dele is talking about a male now. You should not use herself or itself or myself. No. Dele bought the gift himself. The boys punished themselves. The boys punished themselves. That is, this one punished himself. The other boy punished himself. The other one also. Now, why do we have themselves? The reason is simple. You know, when we use personal pronoun, when you talk about he, she, then for the plural, those ones are singular. For the plural, for your personal pronoun, when you talk about daily, you have more than one person mentioned in that sentence. You are going to use they, right? For example, Titi, Tolu, and Tope. You want to replace those nouns with a pronoun now. You are going to use they. So they is used in what? In the personal pronoun as a subjective form, performer of an action. But when you talk about it in the objective case, that is receiver of action, that is where you say, oh, the teacher beats Dele, Wale, and Folarin. So if you want to change Dele, Wale, and Folarin to pronoun, it would be the teacher beats them. The teacher beats them. So them in that case is in the objective form. So now we are talking about this to be in the objective form. Your reflexive pronoun for the boys punished themselves. That is, this one punished himself, this one punished himself, this one punished himself. So you have the boys punished themselves. Sometimes people do confuse reflexive pronoun with reciprocal pronoun, especially themselves and one another. Now, let me clear that. Themselves and one another. If I say the boys punished one another, it is different from the boys punished themselves. When we say the boys punished themselves, it means Diolu punished himself, Akin punished himself, and like that. They punished them like it was an individual action. But when you say the boys punished one another, the boys punished one another. If I have three boys, in that case now, I have Dele, I have Ashafa, and I have Bolahon. It means Dele punished Ashafa and Bolahon. Ashafa also punished Dele and Bolahon. And Bolahon punished Ashafa and Dele. So that is one another. You this one punished this one punished this one. But when we say themselves, it means that I punished myself, you punished yourself, the other person also punished himself, and like that, like that. I hope you get the difference now between themselves and oneself and one another. Sorry. Good. So let's proceed. We treated ourselves to a nice dinner after the presentation. The presentation was a successful one, glory be to God, and we treated ourselves to a nice dinner after the presentation. Now we have, did you all enjoy yourselves at the party? Did you all enjoy yourselves at the party? You did not answer my question. Did you all enjoy yourselves at the party? Or maybe you did not go to any party. Let's proceed. Okay, thank you. Now, note, reflexive pronouns cannot be subjects. For example, himself did it. Himself did it. No, you cannot use your reflexive pronouns as the subject. The next point to note is that we have some words here. Okay, you have a question? Kindly let me explain this slide before you ask your question. Thank you. Or better still, you can put your question in the message box. I'll get it there. Put your question in the message box. The next point to note is their selves, their self, myself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves are grammatically incorrect. Now, why are these words incorrect? I have their selves. I have itself. I have myself. I have ourselves. And I have, what again do I have here? I have himself, ourselves. Now, let's start from himself and ourselves. When you talk about himself and ourselves, you can only use them in the singular. They are singular. So you cannot pluralize them. You can't say himself. You can't pluralize himself and ourselves because they're just what singular. They are singular pronouns. Now, when we say oh, this should be ourself in the singular form, not the plural case, please. Ourself, O-U-R-S-E-L-F, not ourselves. This one is correct. The one that is wrong is O-U-R-S-E-L-F. This is an error from my past. Please kindly pardon me for that. This is O-U-R-S-E-L-F. Why can we not have this to be in the singular form? The reason is not far-fetched. We can't have it to be in the singular form because our is plural. So I have this to be ourself, not ourselves. So and that's correct. Why is that so? I'll answer that question after the slide. Good. Now, another one we have here is reflexive pronouns should not be used when subject is not equal to object. When your subject is not equal to your object, you should not use reflexive pronoun. Just like the questions we answered before we started our class on reflexive pronouns today. So for those that joined early, please kindly watch this video when you have it been uploaded. Kindly go back to this video, the recordings of this class when it is uploaded, because we already answered some questions before we started this reflexive pronoun explanation. So you have the reason why reflexive pronoun should not be used when subject is not equal to object. Why? Because when we talk about reflexive, it is bouncing back upon itself. So if the person is not, why is it now called reflexive? If the subject is not equal to the object, for example, now, the teacher punished Akman and myself. Definitely, Akman and the other person are two different people. So you can't use a reflexive pronoun there. Because Akman, which is like the object there, is not equal to the subject. So that is why you cannot use reflexive pronouns when the subject is not equal to the object. Okay, before we move to relative pronouns, Elena asked a question. Why do we have, did you all enjoy yourself at the party? And I would say the reason why we have that is because I made a mistake. That was a mistake. Why during the process of preparing for the class, it was a mistake. So when you use did, when you use did, you should use the base form of the verb, the past form. When you use did in forming question in your sentence, you should use the base form of the verb, not the past form. For example, did you all enjoy yourselves at the party? So please pardon me. I think I have a lot of errors in my slide today, which is so unusual of me. I don't know what went wrong today. So this should be enjoy, not enjoyed. Thanks for calling my attention to that in form of a question. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Did you all enjoy yourselves at the party? So this is to tell all other learners that whenever I am sharing a slide or something, please don't just drop your phone somewhere. You know, this is an online class. It is very easy for you to drop your phone somewhere and let her just be talking. There's recording, or go and watch the recording and go do something else. Please and please, so that when you have any error there, you will be able to spot it out. And you should call my attention if you feel that something is wrong somewhere, politely though, not that you now omit it and say, why did you put that on there now? Seems that you don't even know what you're doing. No, so thank you for that. I know I'm not having polite letters yet. That was just a joke. Okay, so when you use did, if you don't know this now, if you don't know it before now you know. When you use did as to form question, when you use it to form question in the past tense, the main verb should be used, not the past form of the verb. Just use the main verb. The main verb is the base form of the verb, the present form. That is the main verb. You all enjoy yourselves at the party. Thank you to that lady that is using a lead diet account. Thanks for bringing my attention, for calling my attention to this. Can we proceed? Do you know what I explained now? Everyone, the video, to all our viewers that are watching it too, this is just one of the errors, you know. So error is human. So we make errors, no one is above mistake. pardon me, viewers. Now let's move to relative pronouns. Relative pronouns are used to introduce relative clause. Relative clause is also the same thing as. Okay, someone said I think the network is not good enough. Can you all hear me? Am I audible, please? Am I audible, please? No, I
Yes,
am
we
not
can hear
audible.
you.
Wow. I am audible. I am not audible. If I am audible, please thumbs up. Thank you. I think I have more positive than negative. If I am not audible, definitely that's one of Nigeria's factor. That should be your the internet connection or something. Maybe it's not strong enough. And that is why you have to call the class being recorded. So you can please go back to what recording the class. Sorry for that. Or another thing is you can just rejoin the class. If it is still the same thing, kindly rejoin the class. Thank you. Now let's talk about relative pronouns. I said relative pronouns are used to introduce relative clause, and it's also referred to nouns previously mentioned in the sentence. Your relative pronouns will link your dependent clause, which is your relative clause, to an independent clause in a sentence. Now we have the relative pronoun who, whom, which, and that. Mr. Whose. You can you still hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
Okay.
can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, let's proceed, please. Now let's start from whose. When we say whose is a relative pronoun that shows possession or ownership. For example, you have, I know the girl whose pen was stolen. I know the girl whose pen was stolen. Now, if you look at this sentence, I know the girl whose pen was stolen. So this whose here is showing what? Possession. It is talking about that possess this pen. It is talking about the girl that possessed this pen. The whose wife ran away. And wife is now the child. Who I talking about? Now, when we use who, you use who for humans in the subjective form. You use who for humans in the subjective form. Now we are talking about the girl here. The person we are talking about here is the girl. The girl is the subject of this sentence. You know, we said the subject is the performer of an action, the doer of an action, or the person or thing being mentioned, being talked about in a sentence. Now, who scored the goal in this sentence? It is the girl. So who is the relative pronoun introducing what this relative clause or independent or dependent clause, sorry, connecting the independent and dependent clause together. Now, your relative pronoun is going to introduce dependent clause. That is, when we say dependent clause, you from the word depend, so you need something to lean on, to need something for support. You know, for example, now we all depend at a particular stage in life. You all will depend on your parents. You know, as a baby depends on the parents for milk. If the that baby is still a small baby that doesn't eat yet, the baby will depend on the parents for breast milk and all of that in order to survive. If the baby is already eating, then the baby depends on the parents for, oh, mommy, I want to eat rice and all of that. So at some stages in life, we do depend on our parents. But then when you get to some particular stage, you won't depend on your parents anymore. You depend on yourself, and you depend on God. Everyone depends on God. So we depend on him to provide for us. We cannot do it alone. We do not stand alone. So we need a support. And when we say dependent clause, Dependent clause are those clauses that can't stand alone. When they stand alone in a sentence, they will not make a complete sense. For example, scored the goal. Scored the goal. If I say this is the girl, this is the girl, I can say this is correct. This is the girl is correct. If I do not want to tell you anything further, then you shouldn't just ask any question about this. This is the girl means that I, as the speaker and the listener, the person I am talking to, already had a previous discussion about this girl. So when I say, oh, this is the girl, you say, so she's not even as big as I think she is. So this is the girl. But when I say who's called the goal? Who's called the goal? You're like, who's called the goal? And you're not asking a question, you're just making a sentence. Who's called the goal? Who's called the goal? What happened? There must be something there. You can't just tell me who's called the goal. So that is to tell you that you have a relative clause here. That is a dependent clause. Your relative pronoun is going to introduce your dependent clause. Now, who as a relative pronoun is used in the subjective form when what you're talking about is the subject of that sentence. In this case, the girl is the subject of the sentence. This is the girl who scored the goal. Don't worry, we are going to take some questions on this particular aspect. Sometimes in the option you have who, you have whom, you have which, you have that. And people are always confused on which one to choose. Am I to choose whom or who? Which one am I to use? So we are going to look at all of that. The boy who won the award is my son. The boy is my son. The boy is my son. It's just that sentence there. The boy is my son. Independent clause. If I tell you the boy is my son, it is, how do I put this? It is explanatory enough. The boy is my son. Oh, the boy is your son. Okay. Who won the award is just the dependent clause here. You can see this word here, this line here actually needs something to rest on for it to make a sense. Who won the award needs something to rest on for it to make a sense. I am just emphasizing the definition of relative clause here, or dependent clause. Relative clause is the same as dependent clause. Dependent clause makes something to lean on. You know, people say, I need a shoulder to lean on. So that's the dependent clause as that person that needs a shoulder to lean on. Or you know, sometimes when you're crying and somebody tells you, oh, thank you. Yeah, I got sense. Yeah, my shoulder. I always have the time to lean on you whenever I'm sad. If you are sad, you better go and pray and lean on God. If you lean on people and they just shake their shoulder, you are gone. So the boy who won the award is my son. Who won the award is dependent here. Depending on what? The boy is my son. Your relative clause is going to introduce relative pronoun will introduce relative clause. Now let's go to Mr. Whom. We've explained who's and who. Let's go to whom now. Whom is used for humans in the objective form. Now, if the person you are referring to is receiving the action in that sentence, then you use whom. If the person you are referring to is the one performing the action, then you use who, W-H-O. But if it is receiving the action, you use W-H-O-M, whom. Now, let's see. In this example, I have the man whom he talked about is here. The man whom he talked about is here. Don't be confused. The man is not the subject here because he is not performing any action. This he is the subject in this sentence. He. I can replace my he with Ade. Let's replace this with Ade. Ade, maybe Ade. Let's replace this with Ade. Why is this ink so far? It's not. So I have Ade. From the action of what's talking. So who is receiving that action of being talked about? The man. So the man here is the object. Don't say, oh, but the man is starting the sentence. I think it's the subject that starts sentence. No. It is not every time that you have your subject to start the sentence. You can have it in this form. It is now left to you to be able to analyze which one is the subject and which one is the object. I hope we are following. So the man whom Ade talked about is here. Just assume that this he is Ade. The man whom Ade talked about is here. Now, this is to show you that the man is the object. He is the one being talked about. Who is talking about him? Ade is the one talking about him. Let's come back to this place. Who scored the goal? The girl. Who won the award? The boy. If you want to know the subject of a sentence, just ask the question who. Dash the teacher beats Kola. Who beats Kola? You want to know the subject of that sentence. Just ask the question who beats Kola? The teacher. That is the subject. Now, to know the object of a sentence, you just need to know who is that whom is the verb acting upon, who is receiving the action. In this case, who is being talked about? The man. Who is talking about the man? Ade ni Toki is the one talking about the man. The man is the one being talked about. So the man is the what? The receiver of the action of this Ade's Toki. So the man whom he talked about is here. You use whom when you have humans in the subjective form. Now let's proceed. Let's talk about the next one. Which. When you use which for animals and things. Please do not use which for humans. As the man which he talked about is here. The man should get hold of you. I'm gone. So we have which used for animals and things. The book which I read last week was very interesting. The book which I read last week was very interesting. So you use which when you talk about what? When you talk about animal and things. The book which I read last week was very interesting. Now, let's talk about that. When do you use that as a relative pronoun? When do you use that as a relative pronoun? Just like which, when you talk about that as a relative pronoun, that is going to introduce restrictive relative clauses. What do I mean by restrictive? That is the relative clause that provide essential information about what you're referring to, about the what you're referring to in that sentence is called what? A restrictive relative clause. Now, when we say that, you use that to refer to things. You use that to refer to things. As a relative clause, as a relative pronoun, sorry, you use that to refer to what? To things. For example, the last bike that I owned was not very resilient. The bike cannot stand the heat of time. So the last bike that I owned was not very resilient. Now let's look at which and that. What is the difference between which and that? You use which and that for animal or things. You use this which and that. Which and that are both used for what? Animal or things. Let me take it this way. Okay, let's bring it here.
Five and four, but please, I can't hear you again.
Which and that? Which and that are used for what? For things. You use which and that for what? Animal or things. Now, when do you use which? When do you use that? You use that when you introduce a restrictive relative clause. You use that when you introduce a restrictive relative clause. What do I mean by restrictive relative clause? Your restrictive relative clause provides essential information about the what? About its antecedents, that is the previous thing being mentioned. If you remove a restrictive clause from your sentence, it would change the meaning. So that is used to introduce restrictive relative clause. I would explain this using an example for better understanding. The subject that I liked best in school was Yoruba. The subject that I liked best in school was Yoruba. Now, I just want to use this to explain what I mean by restrictive relative clause. When you say restrictive clause, it is that clause that, gives additional information about what is being mentioned in the sentence. And if you remove a restrictive relative clause, the sentence is not going to make any sense. It is going to change it. It is going to change the meaning of the sentence. Now, let's see. The subject that I liked best in school was Yoruba. This is my relative clause here, being introduced by the what? The restrictive relative clause that. It has been introduced by the what? Relative pronoun that. Sorry. Relative pronoun that introduces this clause. What type of clause is this? It is a restrictive dependent clause. Remember, dependent clause is also the same thing as relative clause. Now, I mentioned something. I said for restrictive clause, when you remove them in a sentence, it is going to change the meaning of that sentence. Now, let's do that. Let's try that. I would remove this now. Let's assume I don't have that here anymore. I don't have that I like best in school as an additional information here. The only thing I have left here is the subject was Yoruba. If I should just tell you the subject was Yoruba, you'll be like, the subject was Yoruba. What are you saying? Please repeat the sentence. Make the sentence complete. You can see that the removal of that I like best in school changed the sentence totally. That means that when you use that, it is used with the what? Restrictive relative clause. It introduces a clause, a relative clause that you cannot remove. If you removed it, it will change the meaning. If you remove it, it will change the what? The meaning of that sentence entirely. Now, when we say a non-restrictive relative clause, you use which. Use which for a non-restrictive relative clause. When we say non-restrictive, it is just the opposite of restrictive. If restrictive is going to add additional information that when you remove it will change the meaning of the sentence, then non-restrictive means that it will add additional information that if you remove that additional information, when the additional information is being removed from the sentence, it is not going to change the meaning. The sentence is still going to what? Maintain its meaning. Although, giving that information, we already called it additional. It is just what? Giving more information about what is being mentioned in the sentence. Now, let's look at which. I hope I am communicating. If you do not understand, Or if I am too fast, just let me know. Let's talk about which. When we say which, it is a relative pronoun that you use to introduce your relative clause or dependent clause. It also what adds information, but now in a non-restrictive way. Non-restrictive means that if I remove that information from the sentence, it doesn't change the meaning of that sentence, although that information will just give me what? More knowledge about what is being discussed. Let's take an example to buttress that point. Okay, I did well in mathematics. I did well in mathematics. Which was always my favorite subject. Now we want to use which. Which was always my favorite subject. I know some people here do not like mathematics. Please, my eye is just taking one dot. Before people will say, oh, English teacher that is putting 2 dots on small letter I. Okay, now I did well in mathematics, which was always my favorite subject. Now, which introduced this, it introduced this dependent clause, was always my favorite subject. You would agree with me that was always my favorite subject cannot stand alone. It needs something to lean on. So that thing that it will lean on here is I did well in mathematics. If I should tell you that I did well in mathematics without adding which was always my favorite subject, please, does it make a sense or not? Does it make sense or not? Good, it does make sense. I did well in mathematics, but giving you the additional information is just for you to know that, oh, it has always been my favorite subject. Don't think that I just did well this time, this term. I've always been doing well in mathematics. So which is going to introduce what? Non-restrictive relative clause. Restrictive means that if I remove it, it doesn't spoil anything. Non-restrictive, oh, sorry. Restrictive means that if I remove it, it will change the meaning of the sentence. Non-restrictive is the opposite. If I remove it, it would not change the meaning of the sentence. It will still make a sense. Giving this non-restrictive clause is just what additional information about what is being discussed. Do you all understand? Do you all understand, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. If relative
Yes, sir.
pronouns, which other one? Relative pronouns. So far, we've talked about relative pronouns, personal pronoun and its arrangement. We've talked about reciprocal pronouns. We've talked about, what again? Possessive pronouns. Good.
Reflexive pronoun.
Reflexive pronouns too. Good. If those ones are clearly understood, now let's practice some questions before the end of the class. Let's quickly practice some questions. For those that joined the class late, for those that joined the class late, we've looked at this question before I started explaining pronouns today. So we looked at the teacher invited Akpan and Dash to his office, and we picked me as the option. Why did we pick me? Remember these 2 rules that I gave, we and us, subjective and objective. If we can fit in the option, in the gap, then you should use you and I. If us can fit in the gap, then you should use you and me. So let's look at the first sentence again. The teacher invited Akpan and Dash to his office. Myself, me, I, and himself. Now, if you want to fit in this gap, it would be the teacher invited us. Yes or no? Yes. It will be the teacher invited us to his office. And we already said when you use us, use you and me. The teacher invited you and me to his office. the teacher invited you and me to his office. Now, we will not use myself because myself is a reflexive pronoun here. And the teacher is the subject here, is the one inviting, so is the one performing the action. It is not the same thing as what? As myself. We have different things in this sentence. We have different people in this sentence. So we will not be able to use myself. We won't use I because this is in the objective form. This action verb, invite, the act of inviting is upon Akpan and me. It is not Akpan and I. I is in the subjective form. Object is the receiver of the action. So Akpan and me are the ones receiving the action, not Akpan and I. I is subjective. And himself also will not be used because it is a reflexive pronoun. And when you talk about reflexive pronoun, the subject is also the same thing as the object. But here in this sentence, the subject is not the same as the object. So reflexive pronoun is a no, no, no. Now, number 2, dash are good friends. He and I and him, I and he and me. If you look at we and us, one of these will fit in this gap. A, let's use we. We are good friends. The second one, let's call it B. Us are good friends. If you look at this properly, you would see that we fit in this gap compared to us. We fit in this gap. We is the correct thing to be used here. We are good friends. And when we talk about we are talking about you and I. In this case now, you do not have you here, but you have he. He is also in the subjective form. That is why we chose he to be our answer. I and him. I is subject, fine, but him is object. We cannot have subject and objects here. Since you are talking about subject, you should not find an objective pronoun here. Objective form, no. I and he. In the arrangement, he should come before I. That is why option C is also wrong. Then I have he and me. This would have also been correct, but because of the me is objective, not subjective. And here we need subject and not object. So to those that missed the two questions, the two previous questions, to the learners that missed this, I think you already caught up with those that answered the question. So let's see if we can take more questions before the end of this class. We have just 7 minutes to the end of the class. I hope we'll be able to take 3 questions. Okay. Now, quickly, let's take some questions. Okay, I have question 1. Question 1. The head of state in his New Year broadcast So this question is from the past question, UTME past question, 1979, question 94. The head of state in his New Year broadcast to the nation emphasized the need for Nigerians to regard Dash as members of the same family. I have my options. Option A, I have themselves. Option B, I have each other. Option C, I have yourselves. Option D, I have one another. Okay, the head of state in his New Year broadcast to the nation emphasized the need for Nigerians to regard Dash as members of the same family. So I have themselves, I have each other, I have yourselves, and one another. What do you think the option to this question is? What is the right answer to this question?
D.
One another. Okay, one another, one another, one another. D. Why is everybody choosing D?
because D is the answer.
Because D is the answer. Hmm. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option D. Here, well, if you look at this sentence properly, it is talking about what? Mutual action. So it is saying that you should love this person, or you should regard this person as member of your family. You also should regard this other person as member of your family. If you talk about themselves, then it is talking about what? A reflexive pronoun. Talking about a reflexive pronoun. So if we say reflexive pronoun, it means that here Nigerians should regard themselves individually and not mutually. So this is out of it. Now, when we talk about each other is used when you talk about two people. So this one also is gone because we have more than two here. It did not say two Nigerians, it says Nigerians. Now, when we say yourselves does not agree with what Nigerians, because this one is in the third person. Is in the second person plural, yourselves. So this is out, and you have what? One another to be the right answer. It is saying that I should treat you as member of the same family. As a Nigerian, I should treat you, my fellow Nigerian, as a member of my family. You also treat another Nigerian as a member of your family. You also treat another Nigerian as a member of your family, and all of that. So the answer to this question is what? One another. Any question before we call it a day? Please and please do not let your learning stop here. Do not let the learning stop here. After the class, during your leisure time, go back to everything we've done, because in our next assessment, by the special grace of God, I'll be bringing questions from everything we've studied so far, not just the new concept we did this week. Our questions will be from everything we've studied so far, and time waits for no one. The D-Day is fast approaching. You might think that, oh, I still have a lot of time, I still have time is not waiting for anyone. So please and please, act now, act fast, and don't wait till the exam is just um in 2 days before you start trying to force everything into your brain. Act now. Don't wait. Don't wait till rush hour. Some people will say, oh, the time that I get to learn very fast is when I am rushing. When the exam is tomorrow, that is when I learn very fast. I can just put everything in my head. You just realize that the next day you wake up with banging headache, and you now be crying. What do I do now? Reform, I cannot even remember anything that I have read again. So please, I don't want such story for any learner here. So it is better you start acting now, and let your success meet you prepared. Let your examination meet you prepared. Not that you get to the exam hall and you be fidgeting. So please and please, may God make it easy for us all. All right, with this, we'll end the class for today. and await the next tutor. I'll see you in the next class by the grace of God. Take good care of yourself. Don't forget to study. Study as if you've never prayed and pray as if you've never studied. See you in the next class. Bye.
Exactly.